So everybody who's just joined on, I hope that you're happy with us recording. We won't see any of your faces, but if you have any questions, they might come up with your name at the end. Actually, while we're waiting for everybody to jump on, I'm going to ask everybody how you've joined us today. So we're just really interested to know who our audience is today, and if you're joining us as a concerned public member, if you are part of a council, if you are supplying any dark sky products, so you might be within the lighting industry or some services, an ecologist, researcher, or anything similar, or indeed any other. So yeah, it just helps us understand who we're speaking with and who our questions might come from today as well. So we'll just wait a few more minutes. I hope everybody's safe and well and not too affected by the floods as well. We've certainly been hearing a lot of that on the news lately. So you take care of yourselves and yeah, get through the next couple of weeks and months by the sounds of things even. Okay. So for those of you who aren't joining us live, we'll also put this up onto our website at the end. So if you want to go back and look at it, or if you want to share it with anybody as well, we'd be delighted for you to show this presentation to as many people as possible, and perhaps inspire some dark sky conservation efforts, or as we like to now talk about it, as night environment conservation. So, great. So we do have 100 people registered, and we've got 20 with us at the moment, but I will wait just a couple more minutes before getting underway. Again, if you've just joined us, my name is Marnie Ogg, and I'm one of the directors of the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance, and we're delighted to have you join us today. So just give us a few more minutes. If you can participate in the poll. So currently it looks like we've got no council members joining us, but quite a few members of public. So that's good to know. You can all go and speak to your councillors and ask them to get involved with this dark sky conservation efforts. Okay. Well, in the interest of timekeeping, I will get this underway and I will end the poll there. But it is good to know. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'll end that there. And I don't know, could you see that? You probably couldn't see the results. Can I, if I do that, can you see the results? There you go. So 60% of our audience is interested public members, and there's a question. Yes, we can see it. Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me know. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to get this underway and officially welcome you to Taking Steps Towards Night Environment Conservation, with the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance bringing to you a series of speakers today and opportunities for you to ask questions about how you and your council, or your business even, may be able to get involved with looking at the night environment and conserving what Australia has. And as I say that, look at that picture of Australia and New Zealand and the Oceania region, and just see how little light pollution we have in our country. But this is developing and growing. The light pollution is growing rapidly, as we know, globally, and Australia will not be immune to that. But as we have a lovely dark sky over most of our continent, we should be taking steps to preserve that. So today we have a couple of presenters. We have a team of fantastic students from the University of Melbourne joining us, and I will shortly let them say a few words as well. They've put together a video which I will share. Dr. Marty Lockett, who is joining us from the Urban Light Lab, who has worked with councils looking at how they can introduce a lighting management policy or plan into their workplaces and their local LGAs. And Landon Bannister, who is also a Australasian Dark Sky Alliance director. He'll be joining us as well from a lighting perspective, so lighting industry perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to try and share the video. Actually, I've got one more thing to do before that. And that is acknowledge those who have been looking at the night sky for tens of thousands of years. So the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance acknowledges the first peoples of Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the rightful custodians and traditional owners of lands and skies. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging who safeguard this foundation to First Peoples Nations connection to land and sky. And a beautiful drawing there by Badger Bates, the Barkantji people in New South Wales. So without further ado, enjoy this movie by the University of Melbourne team. Thank you.
Chances are you live in an area with extreme light pollution, and that problem is only getting worse. Light pollution refers to excessive or obtrusive artificial light caused by bad lighting design. It includes such things as glare, sky glow, and light trespass. Lighting that is overused, misdirected, or otherwise obtrusive is simply pollution. Between the years of 1992 and 2017, light pollution grew by 49%, a rapid change that escaped notice by most people. We are quickly feeling its effects. If you are under the impression that light pollution only impacts non-humans, think again.
A lot of the things which are bad for wildlife are bad for humans. So yes, lighting an area up may allow humans to use it as though it were daytime and extend the day. But we now know that when we do that, we disrupt our own systems.
The Australasian Dark Sky Alliance aims to improve communities and ecosystems by protecting the night sky. To combat the effects of light pollution, the ADSA is here to encourage local communities to develop a lighting management plan.
It's about thoughtful placement of lights and not wasteful use of energy at night. So when we use lights, they have to be warranted and they have to be the appropriate lumen. So basically, instead of our night sky being blue or grey, our night sky is completely black.
Although a dark sky certification is the gold standard for light pollution mitigation, simply developing a lighting management plan can reap rewards for your community. Lighting management plans can improve the health of your community, restore ecosystems, and save your town money. Additionally, the current outdated lighting policies fail to address the problems they seek to solve.
A lot of our assumptions about the roles that lighting fills are well-founded. We stick lighting up to solve problems that aren't cured by lighting. And so that lighting is obviously completely wasted from both a human use perspective, but it's also just needless light pollution going up into the sky and out into the wilderness.
A modern lighting management plan must be designed to improve upon this outdated mode of city planning. We encourage you to learn from past mistakes in development and implement an LMP to minimize light pollution while providing for the needs of your community. Do you have concerns over the complexities of an LMP? There's no need to worry.
It is basically a set of rules around what people can and can't do with light in the jurisdiction. Now, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, and it doesn't even have to be one set of rules for all areas. You'll find, most successful lighting management plans are actually broken up into precincts and regions, depending on, whether it's a residential area or a retail precinct, industrial area, those type of things. But The rules are absolutely essential because we know that if we don't have them and leave it to the free market, it becomes a race to the bottom.
The first steps towards a lighting management plan are straightforward. It starts with talking to colleagues and the community to see if there is support, and then get advice from staff through a notice of motion. Raising awareness of this issue helps build a groundswell of interest and the understanding of the community. What could follow is a revision and development of new strategic planning statement for the community that includes considerations for light pollution. A good lighting management plan benefits your community in several ways. Firstly, light pollution is attributed to many negative health effects, such as a decrease in melatonin levels, increases in stress, and increases in cancer risk. Lighting management plans can help decrease light pollution and contribute to reducing these negative effects. Additionally, long-term studies in the UK found little evidence of harmful effects of environmentally friendly light policy on crime and road collisions. Lighting does not help make places safer, while a lighting management plan does, as it directs people to use a specific place. Light pollution also wastes energy, and poor urban lighting design contributes to increased carbon dioxide emissions and global warming. Millions of megawatt hours MWH of electricity are wasted annually, which results in billions of dollars of costs and millions of metric tons of CO2 released. Last but not least, excessive artificial lighting damages our precious ecosystems. It disrupts the natural distribution of migration patterns of animals and interferes with a species' ability to rest, eat, and bear young. From moths to seabirds, rare possums to marine turtles, we can already see the negative effects of using excessive lighting on our wildlife. A lighting management plan would protect the wildlife in your council's area and help your local ecosystem thrive. Perhaps the most important part of any lighting management plan is engaging with your local community. Community groups, like a Chamber of Commerce or environmental activists, can provide a strong foundation of support for your lighting management plan.
It does come down to talking to the people, because that's why you have the lighting. Who are the people in the space? Who is using these spaces after night? Because they're the people that you have to answer to. They're the people you have to address.
Your community is the group that will see the direct effects of the lighting management plan, so effective communication is key. Some strategies we recommend include education programs in schools, public advertising campaigns, and social media marketing. Light pollution affects anyone and everyone and will continue to grow as a problem unless actions are taken in the immediate future. The first step that your community can take is to develop a lighting management plan. LMPs are a tool that can improve the health of your citizens, community, and economy, and should be developed with a broad coalition of support. The night sky is a gift we all share, and preserving it will take a global effort. If we work together and take action now, we will protect the night sky for posterity.
It's the most beautiful thing about light pollution. It is actually the easiest of all pollutants to solve. It's, trying to solve water pollution, we're talking a 50, 100-year strategy. We're trying to solve air pollution, same thing. But with light pollution, you just can simply start to make better decisions, and we will actually start to reverse the problem.
Okay, so if you thought that was put together by the ABC or the BBC, you'd be wrong. That was put together by some university students at the University of Melbourne, and I'd like to introduce you to them now, actually. So Jack and Henry and Jerry and Vera, would you like to jump online and just give us a little bit of background to how this came about? Is Henry, Vera, Jack, Jerry, yay, thank you, team.
All right, I guess I'll start. I'm Jack, and along with Henry, Vera, and Ja, we are with the University of Melbourne Science Communication class. We were assigned this as a project where the intent was to develop a video to educate the public or a specific audience about an issue related to science, and to work on our communication skills with this. So through help with our professors in the university and with Marnie, we worked on this video. All of us came into the subject relatively, we didn't know much about light pollution when we started, but we learned a lot along the way by talking to different experts. And we learned quite a bit about video editing through all the iterations of it as we went on. But I think we're all pretty proud with how it worked out, and we hope you enjoyed the video as well. Thank you.
Great. So I think there's some important things that we need to share too from the University of Melbourne's perspective. So this was a project that is a work task, so they are being graded on it, and we would love your feedback on it. So at the end, there's a little poll that just asks you, how much have you learned about light pollution? Has it inspired you to go off and do something, or and what you learned, what made it work for you? So if we could get your feedback at the end, that would be gratefully received. But I think the other thing is that in the process of us working together on this project, first of all, want to thank the guys, because they came to this not knowing much about light pollution, having no idea, but just ran with this project. And one of the questions that they asked me was, well, what do you want out of this? Why do you, what can ADSA most achieve? And the thing is that we get a lot of councils. More and more we're getting council groups coming to us and saying, let's do this. How do we do it? How do we go about making our space dark sky friendly? And so that was the thing I put out to the group. Could you come up with something? And never in my wildest imagination did I think they'd come up with something so spot on, with such perfect scientifically based information in a way that can be engaged by all. So I hope you all, as the audience, appreciate and understand and see that too. Yeah. So moving on so that we can actually answer your questions and perhaps focus a little bit more on some specifics of the way you can move towards dark sky conservation. I would like to introduce Marty Lockett. So Marty, if you want to jump on and we can get your video.
Hi, everyone.
Morning again, Marty. Nice to see you. Yeah. Are you happy just to launch straight into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I'm dreadful on doing introductions for people. So if you'd like to share who you are, go for it. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Marnie. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure that I've shared the right screen. Is everyone now looking at a slide rather than a presenter view?
It's working.
Fantastic. I'm Dr. Marty Lockett. I'm an ecologist in the Urban Light Lab at the University of Melbourne. My colleague and supervisor, Associate Professor Teresa Jones, and I spent the first half of this year talking to local councils about really what are ways we can improve the adoption of wildlife sensitive lighting by local government. And we also were speaking with the Victorian Department of Transport as part of this. And what are the tools that we can create to assist local government to sort of increase the adoption of wildlife sensitive lighting. And I use that phrase wildlife sensitive lighting just to emphasize that really the only we sometimes see the phrase wildlife friendly lighting used, and that kind of has connotations that if you put more of this light out into the environment, that's good for wildlife. As we now know, the only good light for wildlife is natural light, so the sun, the moon, and the stars. But that said, when we're thinking about putting light into the environment for human uses, there are ways that we can be sensitive to the needs of wildlife and make lighting more wildlife sensitive. So, so the problem that sort of led to this was that we now have a lot of scientific knowledge about what light is the least and what light is the most harmful to wildlife and the environment. We also increasingly have the technology to implement light that fulfills human needs whilst causing the least harm to wildlife. And yet day after day, we're still seeing, bad, I put bad in inverted commas, obviously it's a judgment, but light that is suboptimal from a wildlife perspective being installed because that's the way things have always been done. And so we wanted to talk to local government and Department of Transport and identify ways in which we could fix this. So we sat down and we had a series of roundtables with local government and some people from the Gippsland section of the Department of Transport. And we tried to just talk to everyone associated with lighting decisions, which turned out to be a much bigger group than we anticipated. Identify barriers, so what barriers exist that are preventing the adoption of wildlife sensitive lighting, identify what opportunities exist to increase its adoption, and then finally create tools to assist busy council officers who are making lighting decisions, but perhaps are having to do that in the context of a lot of other competing pressures. I'm not going to talk to all these points today, but I just wanted to note quickly that it soon became apparent that within local government, there's a huge number of people who are involved in making lighting decisions or considerations around lighting. And there's just a list of the sort of areas of officers that we spoke to. And look, in retrospect, most of them are perfectly sensible and obvious, but we just had no idea that there were so many people involved in local government associated with lighting decisions. And so it's everything from the practical side, you know, the facilities and the infrastructure and the capital side of things, to the community safety, accessibility, social inclusion, energy efficiency, arts and culture. It's a really broad swathe of people. I'm not going to talk to points 3 and 4 today, but I do want to run through very quickly the tools that we created to assist council officers. And this came out of partly out of the National Pollution Guidelines for Wildlife, which is a fantastic document that the Australian government has developed and is continuing to develop. And it's an amazing resource for people who are interested in the ecological effects of artificial light. But it is 100 and something pages and growing. And so it's not going to be a lot of busy people's first port of call if they've got to try and incorporate wildlife sensitive lighting. So acknowledging that people need different information in different contexts, we developed some tools with the assistance of local government to try and put information in people's hands in a format that was useful to them. So the first of these tools we developed was a resource guide, which was basically a guide to where people could go for wildlife sensitive lighting products, where they could go for information about the ecological effects of lighting, where they could go for the information about the human health effects of lighting, and finally, information about the intersection of artificial light and crime and safety. And the emphasis here was on finding publicly available information. Obviously, a lot of stuff is locked up behind paywalls, and where possible, peer-reviewed scientific information. And this was to assist people who were interested to advocate for better wildlife-sensitive lighting strategies within organisations. The second thing we created was a decision guide, and this was really for people who are perhaps coming to this fairly new and just want to know how to do wildlife-sensitive lighting, but have never done it before. And it's really just steps you through decisions in a way that helps you balance human need and wildlife sensitivity. So I won't take you through all of this, but broadly speaking, it reflects the 6 principles of wildlife sensitive lighting that have been established now for some time. So basically only using well, so start with natural darkness, only add lighting for a specific purpose, only add the strength of lighting that you need, only add lighting when it's needed, so using adaptive controls. Using light with as little blue spectrum as possible, because that's particularly disruptive of natural systems, and finally avoiding reflective surfaces. But when it comes time to apply those principles in the real world, sometimes people need a way to step through that. And so this hopefully does that, first by stepping people through where the lighting is required, then, well, for a specific project, what ecological impacts it might have. That's part 2. Part 3 is about minimizing lighting intensity, and part 4 is about controlling the timing and the spectrum, the color, and the spill of that lighting. Then the third tool we came up with was a set of sort of template lighting specifications, and this was to allow people within government to communicate with planners, lighting contractors, and lighting consultants, many of whom are themselves not that familiar with wildlife sensitive lighting principles, and unless directed otherwise, may tend to apply the solutions that they have always applied. And I think that's a big part of why we see the same old lighting solutions being rolled out. And so please don't try and read that. Anyone who wants a copy of the report is welcome to have it. But the emphasis in these specifications was to require planners and consultants to explicitly consider wildlife and to delineate clear boundaries between wildlife and human priorities. So there will be places, pedestrian crossing at a busy car park where, there is a human need for lighting which must take priority. But there will be other places and times, shared paths on a creekway, lighting at a sports pavilion that backs onto bushland, these sort of things, where there's that real possibility of taking both human and wildlife needs into account and balancing them. And finally, the final emphasis here is on putting adaptive lighting strategies into lighting specifications at the very beginning. And one of the things that was emphasized to us is things that aren't there at the very start of a project, no money will be assigned to them and they will never happen. And so the emphasis was on making sure that adaptive lighting strategies, things like timers, dimmers, controlling the color of lighting, those things are in from the very beginning. And then the fourth tool that we developed was some more detailed case studies for common outdoor lighting scenarios. So the four that we targeted, and this was again based on consultation, was shared paths, sports facilities, so tennis courts, football grounds, car parks, and road lighting. So when there's a new intersection put in and there's a need to update the road lighting, or where there's another need to update or renovate road lighting, that's a very common scenario. And so for each of these, and again, don't try and read this, but there's an example there on the right, it steps through multiple strategies for each case study, includes at the start an express consideration of, well, what are the human needs you are likely to need to think about in this case study? What are the wildlife needs that you're likely to need to consider? What does a best practice outcome look like? So we set out for each sort of thing, well, this is what an ideal car park lighting scenario looks like, for example. But then setting out, as you see here on the right, alternative strategies, because we know that the best practice outcome is not always possible. The best practice outcome from a wildlife perspective is not always possible, but that doesn't mean that you can't do anything and you just light up the sky. There are always things that you can do, and we provide a whole range of different strategies that may be employable in each scenario, and then set out what are the strengths and weaknesses of each strategy. And so taking together those tools hopefully address a lot of different needs of different audiences within local government and Department of Transport to assist people who perhaps don't have a particular interest in wildlife sensitive lighting, but who would be more than willing to take it into account if they had access to the right information. Finally, the report's now launched in public. It'll be hosted somewhere soon, but in the meantime, if anyone would like a copy, my email address is just up there on the screen. Please get in touch and I'll send it to you. Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Marty. Thank you. I was debating whether we would go to questions now, but I think what we might do is just, if people have questions, they can put it in the Q&A. And we'll go straight to Landon, and then some of those answers might come from Landon as well. But that was fantastic and a fantastic tool. I can't wait to see it in life myself. I haven't actually seen it in person, but yeah, well done on all your work there, because that's just fabulous.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah, comes Landon zooming in. No pressure, Landon. Yeah. Whenever.
Right, let me see if we can't share this screen.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep, I've obviously just blocked what I need to do. There we go. Has that come up as full screen there, Marty?
Yes, but presenter view.
Okay, let's try that again. Worked beautiful in rehearsal.
Yeah, worked well. It's always the way, though. Whilst you're looking for that, I can explain to everybody that you're one of our board members and representing Tasmania. You're also part of the International Dark Sky Association's chapter for Tasmania and Southern Lighting as well. So you wear several hats in regards to dark skies.
We do. Right. I've got to try to share this one more time.
There we go. Let's have a look and see. So whilst you're doing that, Ian's asked, is there a link there where I can watch the video? Yes, we will put it up on the ADSA website. And because you registered with us, we will send you a link as well so you can see that. And is there a map of, Jill asks, is there a map of what zones in particular councils' areas are already converted to wildlife sensitive lighting? That's something that would be lovely to have, but there are very few councils actually doing a lot of stuff. So there's little pockets, but yes, it was one of our goals with ADSA to actually create a map that showed which councils were actually actively becoming involved. That's perfect, Landon. So yeah, there you go.
Bound to happen. Sorry about that.
No worries, but we'll get back to the questions at the end. So thank you.
Right, thanks, Marty. So I thought what we would speak of today is essentially what the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance have been doing in this space in terms of feeding into these lighting management plans that we've just heard all about from the guys at Melbourne Uni. And essentially we've got two streams that we run. We have a best practice lighting principles that we worked with actually ecologists, astronomers, and the lighting community. So it was actually quite a collaborative document. And then we have an ADSA approved program, which is a fixture approval program. So we actually have manufacturers submit luminaires to us. We send them off to an independent third party, and they assess them against criteria that are essentially aligned to these best practice principles. And what's really important to understand is that you cannot have one without the other. There is no such thing as a dark sky sensitive light fitting. There are some fittings that are going to be certainly have a lot of benefits and are better than others, but it is an idea of you have to use them correctly. And so this holistic thing is that you must then actually use these light fittings with the best practice principles in the right way. And the same can be said a little bit about the best practice principles that without the right hardware in the marketplace, then it does make it very hard to action these things out. So I'm just going to, I know Marty, as I said, has touched on this a little bit, but I'm just going to go through these best practice lighting principles and have a look at them step by step. And as he pointed out, it is the first question which we also always ask, is do we actually need light in the first place? And it's amazing how many times the question doesn't get asked. I mean, this is a rural setting and it makes a lot of sense that we shouldn't put light out here, but there are certainly areas in inner urban and in inner city that we really do not need to add lighting to. And so it is the first question that we should always ask when we're looking at any area. The second one is to use adaptive lighting controls, and adaptive lighting controls can mean anything from a dimmer, a motion sensor, timer switches, but it really gets back to where we were earlier in that we are talking about light is something that only exists for humans. And yet in Australia and New Zealand, all too often we see situations like this where we have no people in the area at all, but we still have the light on. And these days with the technology that we have, motion sensing, the ability to turn these things off at a certain time or even just to dim them right back down, that technology is readily available, yet sadly very rarely employed. So really lighting has to respond to human use of space because it's the only reason it's there, and we can save an awful lot of energy. And these are the type of things that we like to see again rolled into these lighting management plans. We also talk about the intensity and using an intensity appropriate to the task. And this is actually a very difficult one to answer. And to explain that to people, I often like to use this slide here. We can see quite clearly the square on the right of the page is quite a lot brighter than the one on the left. Of course, optical illusion, they're actually the same brightness. And what this just shows us is that the intensity is actually that we require is actually quite specific to the area we're working in. The darker the area, the brighter your lighting is going to seem. So in actual fact, in dark areas, we can use a lot less light. And it's important to remember because we have standards that are based on the average, and the average is usually a Melbourne and City, in a suburban area. And so that's not always appropriate for when we're working in remote areas, and there might be other areas where we need to consider that intensity. So intensity is a very difficult one to answer, but it is a product of the environment you're working in. The other thing that we always say about intensity is to keep in mind that it is a direct correlation with overlighting or too much intensity with safety issues. And this is a classic example that we also see a lot of, where we've got an extremely brightly lit path. The intensity is incredibly strong, but what it's done is it's created a contrast issue with the surrounding environment. And so if you were to walk up this pathway at night, you would look out off to the left there and you would feel very unsafe because essentially you can't see into that area and you're very vulnerable. And I can promise any councils out there that the solution is not to then go and add lights off to the left. It is simply to reduce the intensity, to bring the contrast back down to a level that the human eye can handle, and at the same time, reduce light pollution, because this is an overlit area. We talk about lighting only the object or area that is intended, and best way I can do to describe this for you out there is to actually show you this wonderful image, again, that we see all too often in Australia and New Zealand, of a light that is doing exactly the opposite to that. It is a street light. So the object here, or the main purpose of this luminaire, is to light the street and the footpath. And it's probably doing a better job of lighting up the front rooms of those two houses, certainly doing a great job of lighting the roofs. We can see a lot of light spill into the tree as well. It's basically has no control, no direction as to where the light is going. And again, with the technology we have today, this is totally unnecessary, and quite disappointing to see this continually rolled out across the land. This idea of direction too does feed into the fact, again, if we think about lighting for people, and people being ground dwellers, that light should actually be directed down towards the ground, because this is where we inhabit and this is where the lighting is for. And you can see with this light fitting here just how much light is actually being caught in the eave of the house. And of course, a lot of that light going straight up into the atmosphere and creating this light pollution issue. The other thing about this light is that a lot of it is coming straight into our eyes. And when we have that, we have glare. When we have glare, we again have this issue of too much contrast. Our eyes can't handle excessive contrast at night. And so unshielded lights that actually shoot light into our eyes instead of down towards the ground, tend to cause these glare issues. And you can see just simply by shooting that light that our eye can suddenly work, and we can see the guy that's standing in the gate versus before, where it's very difficult to see. And again, sadly, the answer here is not to start to add more light to the gate so we can see the gentleman. It's simply to use better light fittings, make smarter decisions, and in doing so, again, reduce this issue of light pollution. Use reduced short wavelength light is our point 5. And again, Marty touched on this, good and bad. What a short wavelength light is really simply the blue end of the spectrum, of the visible spectrum. These are the wavelengths that we really don't like. They're short wavelengths. At the other end, at the right end, we've got reds and oranges, long wavelengths. And whilst there is no steadfast rule, we know that they are generally better for wildlife. I mean, every species is different, and that's, again, it's not a blanket rule, but on an overall average, better for wildlife, and certainly better for humans as well. So we will still get circadian disruption from long wavelength red light sources, but we need far more of it than we do with the blue wavelength. So this feeds into it. And the other thing that's really worth mentioning about these short wavelength lights, these blue rich light sources, is that they contribute more to sky glow. And sky glow is that haze we see above our cities that stops us from seeing the stars. This graph here, as you can see, as the temperatures, we measure light in colour temperature or Kelvin temperature. And as the temperature goes up, we generally have a lot more blue content in that light source. And what we can see on the left is the relative sky glow on a 1-for-1 basis. Now, Sadly, in Australia and New Zealand, that second from the bottom, lead 4000K, is pretty much what we're rolling out for all of our street lighting. Second from the top, HPS, is a lot of what's being replaced. So you can see, just by selecting the wrong temperature with these short wavelength rich light sources, we're nearly, 2.5 times greater sky glow impact from the same light source. So our decisions do need to be smarter in that regard. The final thing we talk about is to use a suitably qualified lighting professional. And I guess this is where I can assure you that lighting is very nuanced. We have in Australia and New Zealand the International Association of Lighting Designers. We have the Illuminating Engineers Society of Australia and New Zealand, and you can jump on these guys' websites and actually find a professional to help you. But unfortunately, a lot of the decisions about lighting are made by people that spend very little time in the field and know very little about it. And what happens there is that they are basically just able to read a standard, and standards are written about bare minimum compliance. And so if you do want to achieve good outcomes, we always encourage you to seek out a professional. Just quickly, how this all feeds into ADSA approved lighting. We actually assess these luminaires again independently, and we look at 3 tiers: ADSA approved prized, and ADSA approved prized wildlife. Marty mentioned that it's kind of good to have, I'll read your words, it was boundaries between human and wildlife needs. And there will always be areas where we want to prioritise human need, and there will always be areas where we want to prioritise wildlife. And that's why we actually split our criteria into 2 streams, if you like. How does this actually work? What is it we actually assess? Well, if we think back to this best practice principle, we can't encourage you to start with natural darkness. That's a decision for you to make. To use a lighting professional's decision for you to make. But what we can do is actually assess these fittings. Do they have inbuilt adaptive control? So we look for things like dimmability and inbuilt motion sensing and these type of things. We can assess intensity, particularly in wildlife areas. We actually place a limit on how much light a fitting can produce, because one thing that does encourage is lower mounting height. So if we can have fittings that produce lots and lots of light, we can put them up really, really high, and of course cover more area and more spill light, and they become far more visible to wildlife. So we can tackle that as well. Light only the object and area intended. Well, we actually have glare metrics in our approval process. So we are making sure that that light isn't coming into the eye, because it is a very big part of the dark sky story in terms of reducing light pollution. And finally, obviously, we encourage the use of warmer light sources, and in wildlife areas, we go all the way down into essentially light sources that have no short wavelength content at all. So that is a little bit about what we do at ADSA and how we tackle the problem. As I say, these things all feed straight back into a lighting management plan. I mean, these are essentially the things that get incorporated into an LMP. All of those resources, if you want, can be found at the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance website under the technical tab. So please, by all means, look them up or send us an email if you've got any questions. Thank you, Marnie.
Thank you, Landon. Thank you. So I might invite, that was fantastic. Thank you for going through all the work that ADSA approved technical team look after and all the aspects of good lighting, basically. So I'm going to invite Marty to jump back on screen too, and to help answer any questions that the audience may have. So if you've got any questions there, Jill's asked a few good questions there, as I mentioned about the map, but also maybe publishing a league table of councils who have made the move to lighting. Maybe either of you gents, can you answer? Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll start. I think a league table would be great. I suspect it's probably a bit early for that. I think most councils are still, it would be a a league table with a pretty short 1, 2, 3, and then a whole lot of equally placed people in about 5th. Most local government areas are growing, increasingly becoming perhaps aware of the light pollution issue, but adoption is still fairly low. And I think at the moment, we're still probably more at that awareness raising stage. There's obviously also a huge amount of work to do before you could put a league table together in terms of sort of surveying lighting And the other thing I would add too is it is quite difficult to compare apples with apples because obviously, some councils are, in the hills and forests, and there's a lot of wildlife around, and perhaps there's a really strong incentive there. Whereas other councils perhaps have huge industrial zones where for occupational health and safety reasons, there's limits in terms of what they can do for wildlife sensitive lighting. And then finally, I'd add there's also, that principle of, the first question is always, do you need lighting? I would say a lot of, in fact, almost universally, the people I've spoken to at councils in these sort of open spaces, wildlife, biodiversity areas, are pretty good at pushing back on keeping lighting out altogether from areas where it shouldn't be. So, it's hard to assess a council that, you might have a council that's actually very good at keeping light out of dark spaces, but they won't actually have very much wildlife sensitive lighting installed because they've actually drawn a line and said, we just won't put lighting in those spaces. But yeah, I like the idea, and I think one day, we'll get to that point where, we're able to put pressure on perhaps the laggard councils by publishing something like that.
Yeah, we are definitely still at that very, very early stage of awareness raising. Yeah. Landon, do you have anything to add to that about any councils that you are aware of doing things? Or
No, I think it has been it's a slow uptake at the moment in our region, and I think you started this webinar was saying that we are in a fairly dark region. So I think probably that's part of the problem, is that people aren't as aware as say they are in Europe, but I think we're a long way behind the rest of the world, is probably my only comment.
And I think that's right, that we take for granted what we have, but when we've lost it, it's too late. And and
we should be looking at what's happened in the US and what's happened in Europe and going, right, well, this is coming, and making those better decisions now rather than waiting until we've got a much bigger problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you look at, the law that's been passed in France that basically, the highest color temperature you can have outdoor in city areas is 3000 Kelvin. And in country areas, I think it's 2400 or 2200. We're so far away from that, but at the same time, it would be very easy to achieve if we could raise that awareness and get people on board.
I think it's also important to mention, and you did talk about it, Marty, the light pollution guidelines, and that the Commonwealth government has put out, that's 2 years ago, I think, and that really has started a conversation more generally. I think for, my partner, astronomer Fred Watson, has been talking about light pollution for 30 years, and it was something that only seemed to impact the big telescopes of Australia that anybody had any concern about. But the conversation is expanding, and there are people, more and more councils being involved. Liz Buckley's asked here, what are some of the strategies that we're using for engagement? Well, it's just broad education at this stage, getting out to as many communities as we can, doing public talks, providing these webinars. We ran a Guinness World Record Challenge 1.5 years ago with 14,000 people sign up for it, and that just, kids of all ages. There's school programs that you can sign up to and learn about dark skies stuff as a primary school student. What else are we doing, Jen? So,
well, I mean, even just this project dealing with a lot of councils like that has brought us into contact for the first time with people. We're used to dealing with people in sort of the environmental space, the ecology space, but we really need to be talking to, planners, facilities managers, sports ground people, engineers, landscape architects, all these other groups. So it's really about getting to, and it's difficult, you can have all the presentations you like and send out all the invitations you like, but really you almost need to, council by council, get in there and say, who is making decisions on lighting? Let's get them along. Let's talk to them. What is stopping them from using better lighting? And what can we do to help them? And this is the pathway we're setting out on.
Yeah. And I will always encourage everybody to raise their voice and ask for better lighting. Because you made the point too, Marty, that, you know, we've just accepted that this is the way it's going to go. We haven't questioned it. And part of the question that we haven't asked is, you know, do we even need lighting? We've just thought that we always do. And we've accepted all the good bits of light, you know, the productivity, the efficiency, the ability to work in areas that we otherwise couldn't. But we haven't acknowledged that there is a, you know, with anything good, too much of anything too good has anything, you know, as a side effect, I guess, and we haven't negotiated that. So I very much tell people, you know, every public person can go and speak to their councillor and say, have you got a lighting management plan? You know, you've got a waste management plan, you've got a roads and traffic plan, you've got this, but have you considered lighting management plan? And I would say 9 out of 10 councillors haven't thought about it. But if you start that conversation and we're all doing it, then we can all be a part of the change. If we go to the Bunnings and hardware stores and ask for the right lighting for our own backyard, and we use this for ourselves, or we employ a lighting manager, a designer to actually come in and look at our workplace and our buildings outside and actually introduce dark sky principles, then we can all make that change. So I think we all have to set the bar, basically. Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Marnie, that we wouldn't have got the support of the International Association of Lighting Designers or the Illuminating Engineers Society for our best practice lighting principles if they thought in any way, shape or form it was going to create worse environments for humans. You know, this isn't about, being worse off. It actually will improve spaces for people. And as a lighting professional, I can promise you that is the case. So, we sort of think about the good things, but we can actually do so much better than what we are doing and improve the environment. This is not we're not sacrificing anything to do this. This is a win-win. And I think it's always important to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that sort of feeds into Gavin's question about what are the government streetlight providers saying about dark sky? Anyone?
I'm very jaded and angry, and probably not the person to answer this, but I will say that it's a very funny system, particularly in Australia. New Zealand are streets ahead, excuse the pun. But we are essentially making councils purchase light fittings from the same people that they then have to purchase power from, which is a fairly corrupt system if you want to think about it. The incentives for them, or their key drivers, are generally based around maintenance, so longevity of light fittings and cost. At this stage, the only way to change that is from pressure from council, so from the bottom up to the energy providers. Without that pressure coming, they will continue to do what is cheapest, what has the best maintenance story, and really they have no incentive to do the right thing by the environment in any way, shape or form under the setup of the federal government that is street lighting in the Australasian market. One damning statistic I heard is that I think over 90% of street lights in New Zealand have been rolled out with intelligent control. In Australia, since they've been replacing lead replacements, which is now up over 40% of all street lights have been replaced, that uptake is less than 4%. And the justification of that is that there's no energy payback because the costs to put in the smart control versus the energy they'll save doesn't stack up. And we totally exclude all the environmental benefits of being able to dim lights back and turn them off at certain hours. So, I'm very angry at the setup. We've got a long way to go to improve it, but that pressure has to come from essentially their customers are councils, and that's where that driving force needs to start to be generated.
And I'll just add to that, and in response to Jill's question about can we get individual problem lights changed, the answer is usually it's very hard because if local councils want to install something other than what the networks want to roll out, they basically have to buy the luminaire, they have to store the spares, they have to pay to have it installed. So your cost per light just goes through the roof. And this is the system that we are trying to change. So I think a better approach is pressure councils to pressure networks to put more wildlife sensitive lighting on their pallets, because all of these networks have a pallet of 3 or 4 lights, and that's all they'll install. And none of those lights are wildlife sensitive as things currently stand. So yes, there have been a very few examples of single standalone lights where you know, for Phillip Island, the roundabout outside the penguin colony, for example. Actually, that's a Vic Roads one, but it's similar kind of process. We're able to get approval from the network for a single. I think it's only one light. It might be a small group of 3 or 4 lights to reduce those to 3000 Kelvin, so a redder, less blue light. But by and large, I think the best bang for your buck in terms of seeing change will be putting pressure on councils, to put pressure on networks, and the councils already, like the councils we've been speaking to, are already keen to do this. The networks and their limited palette is the real problem. So if we can pressure, through councils, you know, just show them that there's community support for more wildlife sensitive lighting. I think that's where we're going to see change.
And I think that sort of comes into the question that Joe's asked about ADSA having a seat on the standards committee for lighting. In essence, I guess we have access to it. So the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance, one thing I haven't mentioned was that we were involved in writing a report on behalf of the Commonwealth Government. So the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment asked us, you know, how do we preserve our night sky and our night environment? You know, what are our recommendations on how to do this? And so we've put together a table of ideas, including many that we've discussed today. But one of the other aspects was having more input into the standards committee. So there is a department figure on that committee. And then, as I mentioned, my partner, who's an astronomer, is also involved with that. So we have access to hear what's happening, but we don't have a seat at the table as such, and we can't represent dark sky principles and philosophies outright. I think the committee itself has actually changed. It's gone, at least we now have a representative for the environment on that committee, which wasn't previously there. So I think, you know, we're making small inroads. And the philosophy that we've engaged is 3-tier. One is, you know, bring the community along. The community are the people that are going to ask for this. This is the army of people that can make a difference on the ground. And we can look at businesses and look at how we can influence businesses, policymakers, etc., industries to make changes. And then we need to look at the government as well. So we're attacking all 3 prongs, but no one, and actually I will say that the feedback that we got from councils when we asked them what would it be to put dark sky principles in place, what would be the #1 driver, they said their constituents. They're not going to do anything unless they're asked to do it, is what they said. So
and I'd add to that, constituents can sometimes be real allies, including for reasons that are unrelated to wildlife. So, for example, sports lighting, one of the huge, you know, the reason we don't have cricket grounds still lit up at midnight in most suburbs, there may be some places, is because local residents won't stand for it. And so there are some natural allies there in terms of dark skies and also ecological impacts of wildlife, artificial light on wildlife, that, you know, they're people who themselves perhaps aren't interested in either of those 2 issues, but they do object to having their backyard or their bathroom or their kitchen lit up by sports lighting. Similarly with street lighting, I think, you know, we see pushback, particularly from people who have decided to live in places like, you know, the Dandenong Ranges in Melbourne. And part of the reason they've gone there is because it's beautiful and lovely and dark and natural at night, and they're really not happy about the idea of more street lighting being installed. So I think it's important to not forget that there are allies in this, including allies from perhaps unexpected corners amongst residents.
good point. All right, well, we're coming towards the end, and Ian's asked a few questions, but really they all come back to how, you know, ADSA can help you, and it's great. We'd love to be involved with anyone's projects. So we are a volunteer organisation. We don't have we don't have a bank balance to roll out every project that we'd like to. And indeed, if you'd like to make a donation, we'd be very grateful, which you can do on our website. But we are available to do talks and things, so, or give you pointers on how to get other volunteers engaged in this. As we said, we're still building the army. So if you could be part of that, happy to reach out to you and work out how Knox Gardens Wildlife Program can be enveloping some dark sky principles, or any other organisation that's part of this webinar today. And so before we go, I think I'd love to see Henry, Jack, Jerui and Vera jump back on board and take a bow for their presentation. And we will be in touch with a link for their survey. Oh, actually, let me put this up right now, because I did go to the whole, where is it, survey? Is it here? No, I can't find it. Let me have a quick look. I will share a feedback link. You've actually already got one, but we might have had a few. But if you could help them out with their project and get some feedback, we would be delighted for that. And in the meantime, I thank Marty Lockett for his insights on working with councils, and Landon Bannister for your insights on everything lighting and ADSA approved, and wish you all the best in helping us create a dark sky, a night conservation area across this whole beautiful continent. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marnie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. See you, Jack. Sorry, I couldn't get the survey to come up. See you, Vera.